The floating city of Nexus Prime Academy moved silently through the stars like a massive silver whale. Inside its crystal walls, the most brilliant minds from across the galaxy gathered to learn. But today, something different walked its halls. Hana pressed her tablet closer to her chest as she walked down the long corridor. The ceiling above her head stretched so high it disappeared into blue mist. Alien students moved past her in groups, their voices creating strange music in the air. Some had scales that changed colors. Others had too many arms or eyes that glowed like small suns. A few floated instead of walking. None of them looked at her directly, but Hana felt their stares. She was the only human in the entire academy, the first of her kind to ever step foot in these halls. Every step she took felt heavy with the weight of representing her entire species. The whispers followed her like shadows. "Look at it," said a voice that sounded like wind through metal pipes. "So small and weak. I heard they only learned to fly between stars 50 years ago," another voice hissed. "Babies playing with grown-up toys. Why did the council even let it in here?" Hana kept walking. Her face stayed calm, but her heart beat faster. She had trained for this moment her whole life. Earth had chosen her carefully from millions of candidates. She was their best and brightest, but here she felt like a child among giants. The advanced xenobiology classroom was a massive dome filled with floating desks. Each desk hung in the air at different heights, designed for the many different body types of students. Hana found her assigned spot near the back corner. It was the lowest desk in the room, close to the floor where the less important students sat. As she settled into her chair, something stirred in the shadows beneath her desk. A dark shape uncurled itself and looked up at her with bright yellow eyes. This was Kim Doyen, her companion animal. To anyone watching, he looked like a large earth dog with black fur so dark it seemed to eat light. "Good morning, Doyen," Hana whispered in Korean, scratching behind his ears. He was warm and solid, the only familiar thing in this strange place. The alien students who noticed him at all seemed to think he was some kind of therapy pet. Something to help the weak human cope with being so far from home. They were wrong about so many things. Professor Vextar entered the classroom like a small earthquake. He was 9 feet tall with reptilian scales that shifted from green to deep purple as he moved. His eyes were like golden coins, and when he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Today we study the classification of intelligence levels among galactic species," the professor announced. His gaze swept across the room and stopped on Hana for a long moment. "Some species have evolved over millions of years to reach higher thinking. Others," his scales turned a darker purple, "others have barely learned to leave their homeworlds." Scattered laughter came from around the room. Hana felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her expression neutral. She had expected this. Earth's diplomats had warned her that many alien species saw humans as primitive newcomers. The lesson continued with Professor Vextar displaying holographic images of different alien brains. He spoke about neural complexity, evolutionary advantages, and the natural hierarchy of intelligence. Each time he mentioned humans, it was as an example of a lower form of thinking. "The human brain," he said, showing a rotating image, "is particularly simple. Single-threaded processing, emotional decision-making, and severely limited memory capacity. It is remarkable that such a species managed to achieve space travel at all." More laughter filled the room. Hana noticed that some students were now staring at her openly, their various eyes gleaming with amusement or contempt. She kept taking notes, writing down everything the professor said. Knowledge was power, even when that knowledge hurt to hear. Beneath her desk, Doyen shifted slightly. His ears twitched and his yellow eyes opened wider. Hana felt him tense, but she placed a gentle hand on his head. Not yet. There would be a time for action, but this was not it. After class, the corridor filled with students moving to their next lessons. Hana walked alone, as usual. The voices followed her again, but now they were bolder. "Did you see how it wrote everything down?" asked a student whose body looked like living crystal. "Like it could actually understand." "My species learned calculus before yours even discovered fire," said another voice, this one belonging to something that looked like a walking mantis. "What could a human possibly teach us?" "Maybe we should test its learning capacity," suggested a third voice. This one belonged to Quinethus, a tall insectoid with compound eyes and arms that ended in sharp claws. He had been watching Hana since her first day. "See if humans really are as adaptable as they claim." The group of alien students moved closer to Hana in the corridor. She could smell the strange scents they gave off, metal and ozone and something like old flowers. Their combined presence made the air feel thick and threatening. "Excuse me, human," Kennethus called out. His voice clicked and buzzed like breaking glass. "We have questions about your species." Hana stopped walking and turned to face them. 6 alien students formed a half circle around her. Each one was larger than she was. Each one looked at her like she was something interesting they had found on the bottom of their shoe. "What questions?" she asked. Her voice was steady even though her heart was racing. "We wonder if humans feel fear the same way other intelligent species do," Kennethus said. His compound eyes reflected her image hundreds of times. "Or if your simple brains process emotions differently. We think maybe you need help understanding your place here," added the crystal being. Education that goes beyond what Professor Vextar teaches in class. Below in the shadows near Hana's feet, something moved. The aliens were too focused on intimidating her to notice the way the darkness seemed to shift and breathe. Doyen had followed her out of the classroom, moving silently through the shadows like he had been trained to do. "I understand my place just fine," Hana said. She kept her voice calm and her hands relaxed at her sides. "I am here to learn just like you." "Learn your limits," Kennethus hissed. He stepped closer, his claws catching the light from the corridor's glowing walls. "Learn that some spaces are not meant for lesser species." The other students moved closer too, their various alien features twisted into expressions that needed no translation. Threat, dominance, the promise of violence if she did not submit. Hana felt Doyen move closer to her leg. His presence was like having a piece of Earth's strength beside her. These aliens thought they were cornering a weak and helpless creature. They thought humans were soft and easily broken. They had no idea what humanity had sent to the stars. They had no idea what waited in the shadows, loyal and patient and perfectly designed for moments exactly like this one. "Thank you for your concern," Hana said politely. "But I think I will be fine." She walked past them, her head held high. Doyen moved with her, a dark shape that flowed like water around her feet. The aliens let her pass, but their laughter followed her down the corridor. They thought they had won this small battle. They thought the human had been properly intimidated. Soon they would learn how wrong they were about everything. 3 weeks had passed since Hana's first day at Nexus Prime Academy. The floating city continued its journey through space while inside its halls, the harassment grew worse each day. Hana sat in her small dormitory room, staring at her dinner tray. The food looked normal enough, something like rice and vegetables from the universal food processors. But the smell was wrong. There was a sharp chemical scent underneath the normal food odors that made her stomach turn. Kim Doyen lifted his head from where he lay on the floor. His yellow eyes focused on the tray and a low sound came from deep in his throat. Not quite a growl, but close. His enhanced senses could detect things that Hana's human nose might miss. "You smell it too, don't you, boy?" Hana said softly in Korean. She pushed the tray away from her. This was the 3rd time this week that her food had smelled wrong. Someone was adding things to it. Things that might not kill a human immediately, but would make her sick enough to leave the academy. She opened a sealed emergency ration from her personal supplies instead. The alien students were getting more creative with their attempts to drive her away. Yesterday, her tablet had been reprogrammed to show false information during an exam. Last week, someone had filled her water recycler with a chemical that turned her drinking water bitter and undrinkable. But Hana remained. She studied harder, worked longer, and scored higher on every test than most of her alien classmates. This only made them angrier. A soft chime indicated someone was at her door. Hana looked through the viewer and saw Kennethus standing in the corridor with 2 other students. The insectoid's compound eyes reflected the light like broken mirrors. Behind him stood Morgan, the crystal being, and a new alien she had not seen before, something that looked like a walking tree with too many branches. "Open the door, human," Kennethus called out. His voice carried that same clicking, buzzing quality that reminded Hana of angry insects. "We need to discuss your academic performance." Hana did not move toward the door. Instead, she watched as Doyen rose smoothly to his feet. The black-furred creature moved to stand between her and the entrance. His posture looked relaxed, almost lazy, but Hana noticed how his muscles were coiled beneath his dark fur. "What do you want to discuss?" she called back through the door. "Your test scores are impossible. said Morgan. The crystal being's voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. No human should be able to solve quantum biology equations faster than species who have been studying them for centuries. Perhaps you are cheating, suggested the tree-like alien. Perhaps you have hidden technology that gives you unfair advantages, Hana almost laughed. If only they knew what real advantages looked like. If only they understood what humanity had actually sent to the stars with her. I study hard, she said simply. Nothing more. Impossible, Cunethus hissed. Your brain is too simple. Professor Vextar explained this clearly. Human intelligence is limited and primitive. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with the aliens making increasingly aggressive demands that she open her door and submit to a search of her room. Hana refused politely but firmly. Eventually they left, but she could hear their voices in the corridor discussing other plans. That night, Hana barely slept. Doyen stayed awake beside her bed, his enhanced hearing picking up every sound in the dormitory. Twice he lifted his head and growled softly at noises in the corridor outside. Someone was testing her door's security systems. Someone else was trying to access her room's environmental controls. The next morning brought advanced xenobiology class again. Professor Vextar had announced they would be working with live specimens today. Small, creatures from various worlds that demonstrated different evolutionary adaptations. Hana took her usual seat at the back of the classroom. Doyen settled beneath her desk like always, but today she noticed he did not curl up to sleep. Instead, he remained alert, his yellow eyes scanning the room constantly. The lesson began normally enough. Professor Vextar displayed various small aliens in containment fields while explaining their biological functions. Some students took notes while others recorded everything with their various technological devices. But Hana noticed something wrong. Too many students kept looking at her instead of focusing on the lesson. Cunethus sat 3 desks away, his compound eyes reflecting her image over and over. Other students she recognized from the corridor incident were positioned around the room in a pattern that made her nervous. Halfway through the class, Professor Vextar announced a break. Students were supposed to examine the specimens more closely in small groups. As they moved around the room, Hana found herself surrounded. Time for a practical lesson, Cunethus said quietly. He held something small and metallic in one of his clawed hands. We want to test human pain responses, compared to other species, for science, added Morgan with what might have been a laugh. The tree-like alien moved to block the view from Professor Vextar's desk. 2 other students positioned themselves to prevent Hana from reaching the classroom exits. They had planned this carefully. This will only hurt for a moment, Cunethus continued, showing her the device in his hand. Then you can return to Earth where you belong. Hana felt her heart rate increase, but her voice stayed calm. That would be assault. The Academy has rules against violence between students. Accidents happen during laboratory work, said Morgan, especially when primitive species handle equipment they do not understand. The aliens moved closer. Cunethus raised the device, which looked like some kind of injection tool. The other students formed a tighter circle around Hana's desk. None of them were looking down. None of them noticed the way the shadows beneath the desk had begun to move. Doyen had been bred for moments exactly like this one. His genetic code carried the instincts of Earth's greatest predators. Wolf-pack hunters who could bring down prey 10 times their size. Great cats who could move like liquid death, and something else. Something that human scientists had added when they designed the perfect guardian. The aliens thought they were cornering a helpless human and her pet animal. They had no idea that they were actually threatening the most dangerous predator Earth had ever created. Hana felt Doyen tense beneath the desk. She placed one hand on her tablet as if reaching for her schoolwork. Her fingers found the small button hidden on its side, the one that would send an emergency signal to Earth's embassy ship. But before she could press it, Cunethus lunged forward with his injection device. That was when Doyen exploded into motion. The creature that emerged from beneath the desk was nothing like the sleepy animal the aliens had dismissed. This was 4 feet of perfectly engineered death, moving faster than the alien student's eyes could track. His black fur seemed to absorb the classroom lights. His yellow eyes burned like small suns, and when he opened his mouth, rows of teeth gleamed like polished knives. Cunethus screamed. The sound was unlike anything Hana had ever heard from the insectoid student. Pure terror mixed with shock and the beginning of understanding. The injection device flew from his claws as he stumbled backward, all 6 of his limbs working frantically to put distance between himself and the nightmare that had appeared. Morgan made a sound like breaking glass. The crystal being's normally clear body turned cloudy with fear. The tree-like alien's branches began shaking so violently that leaves scattered across the floor. But Doyen did not attack them. Instead, he placed himself between Hana and the aliens, his muscles coiled and ready. A low sound came from his throat. Not quite a growl, not quite a roar, but something that made every alien in the classroom freeze in absolute terror. Professor Vexitar looked up from his desk, his golden eyes wide with surprise. The giant reptilian had been ignoring the confrontation, assuming it was just normal student interaction. Now he stared at the scene with growing alarm. "What is that creature?" he demanded, his scales shifting to deep purple with shock. Hana stood slowly, her hand resting on Doyen's head. The guardian remained tense and ready, but he did not move without her command. "This is my companion animal," she said calmly. "Kim Doyen. He does not like it when people threaten me." The classroom had gone completely silent. Every alien student stared at Doyen with a mixture of fear and fascination. They were finally beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake about humans and their capabilities. "Sit." "Doyen," Hana said in Korean. The predator sat, but his yellow eyes never left the aliens who had threatened his human. His message was clear to everyone in the room. They had tried to hurt her once. If they tried again, he would not be so restrained. 2 days had passed since the incident in Professor Vextar's classroom. The story of Kim Doyen's transformation had spread through the academy like wildfire, growing stranger with each telling. Some students whispered that the human's pet was actually a shapeshifter. Others claimed it was some kind of robotic weapon disguised as an animal. But Quinethus knew the truth was worse than any rumor. The insectoid student sat in his private quarters, staring at the claw marks on his desk where he had grabbed it during his panicked retreat. His compound eyes replayed the moment over and over, the way that black creature had moved, the intelligence in its burning yellow gaze, the rows of teeth that promised death. He was not used to feeling fear. His species had evolved as apex predators on their homeworld. They feared nothing because nothing had ever been strong enough to threaten them. But that creature beneath the human's desk had awakened something primitive in his brain, some ancient memory of being prey. A soft chime indicated visitors at his door. Quinethus looked through the viewer and saw 8 other students waiting outside. They were the ones who had supported his plans to remove the human from the academy. Now they looked nervous and uncertain. "Enter," he commanded. The group filed into his quarters. Morgan, the crystal being, Velkoth, the tree-like alien, Zasik, a serpentine creature with too many eyes, and 5 others from various species. All of them had been present during the classroom incident. All of them had seen what the human's companion could do. "We need to discuss what happened," said Morgan. The crystal being's normally clear body was still clouded with stress. "That creature is not what we thought it was," obviously, Quinethus hissed. His claws clicked against each other as he paced around the room. "The question is what we do about it." "Maybe we should leave the human alone," suggested Velkoth. The tree alien's branches drooped with worry. "If her pet is that dangerous, perhaps it is better to simply avoid her." "Coward," Quinethus snapped. "Are you so easily frightened by one small animal?" "That was no ordinary animal," said Zasik. The serpent's multiple eyes blinked in sequence as it spoke. "I could smell the killing instinct on it. My species knows predators, and that thing was bred for violence." Quinethus stopped pacing. Bred. That was an interesting word choice. His kind understood selective breeding. They had done it themselves with various food animals on their homeworld. But the idea that humans might have deliberately created such a creature, "Then we kill them both," he said finally. "The human and her pet together." The other students shifted uncomfortably. Violence between species at the academy was strictly forbidden. But more importantly, they had all seen how fast the black creature could move. None of them wanted to face it in direct combat. "How?" asked Morgan. "If we attack her in the corridors again, that thing will be ready for us." Quinethus smiled, his compound eyes reflecting the room's lights like broken mirrors. "We choose the battlefield. We choose the time. And we make sure neither of them can escape." Over the next several hours, Quinethus explained his plan. It was simple but effective. Professor Vextar had announced that tomorrow's advanced xenobiology class would feature a special lecture on interspecies cooperation. Perfect cover for what they intended to do. The classroom's emergency systems could be triggered by any student with the right authorization codes. Once activated, the massive doors would seal shut and the life support would switch to minimum levels. They would have maybe 30 minutes before Academy security could override the lockdown. 30 minutes would be more than enough time to eliminate both problems. "What about witnesses?" asked Velkoth nervously. "There will be no witnesses," Kennethus replied. "Everyone in that room will understand what happened. An unfortunate accident during emergency procedures. The human and her pet were tragically caught in a system malfunction." The next morning, Hana walked toward advanced xenobiology with Kim Doyen at her side. She had noticed more students than usual heading in the same direction. The normally half-empty classroom would be packed today, which struck her as strange. Most alien students avoided Professor Vextar's lectures when possible. Doyen seemed to sense her unease. His yellow eyes swept the corridors constantly and his ears twitched at every sound. The enhanced senses that humanity had given him were picking up pheromone signatures of excitement and aggression from the other students. Inside the massive dome-shaped classroom, Hana found her usual seat near the back. But today something felt different. Students who normally ignored her were positioned all around the room. She counted at least 15 aliens she recognized as part of Kennethus's group, plus several others she did not know. All of them had chosen seats with clear lines of sight to her desk. Kim Doyen settled beneath her workspace, but unlike previous days, he did not even pretend to sleep. His dark form remained alert and ready, yellow eyes tracking the movement of every alien in the room. Professor Vextar entered with his usual dramatic flair. The giant reptilian scales were bright green today, indicating he was in a good mood. He moved to the center of the classroom and activated the holographic display systems. "Today we discuss one of the most fascinating topics in xenobiology," he announced. "The concept of symbiotic relationships between different species." Hana felt a chill run down her spine. The timing of this lecture topic seemed like too much of a coincidence. "Throughout the galaxy," Professor Vextar continued, "we find examples of species that have evolved to depend on each other for survival. Some relationships are parasitic, with one species benefiting at the expense of another. Others are mutualistic, with both species gaining advantages from the partnership." As he spoke, holographic images filled the air above the classroom, alien creatures living in harmony, sharing resources and protection. The professor seemed genuinely excited about his subject, unaware of the tension building around him. "Of course," he added with a glance toward Hana, "some species attempt to form these relationships artificially. The results are rarely as elegant as natural evolution provides." More laughter from the alien students, but today it sounded forced and nervous. Hana noticed that Kennethus was not laughing. Instead, the insectoid was watching the classroom's control panels near the entrance. 20 minutes into the lecture, it happened. A loud warning tone filled the dome. Red lights began flashing along the walls, and automated voices announced in multiple languages that emergency protocols had been activated. The massive entrance doors slammed shut with a sound like thunder. Professor Vextar looked up in surprise as his holographic displays flickered and died. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Emergency lockdown, Professor," called Kennethus from across the room. His voice carried false concern. There must be a problem with the Academy's systems. But Hana knew better. She could see the small control device in Kennethus's clawed hand. She could see the way the other alien students were positioning themselves around the room, and she could feel Kim Doyen tense beneath her desk like a coiled spring. The trap had been sprung. "How unfortunate," Kennethus continued, his compound eyes fixed on Hana. "We may be stuck in here for quite some time. Perhaps we should use this opportunity to continue our discussion about symbiotic relationships." He stood up slowly, and one by one, the other alien students rose as well. Professor Vextar looked around in confusion as 15 sets of hostile eyes turned toward the back corner of the classroom where the humans sat. "What is the meaning of this?" the professor demanded. "Education," said Kennethus simply. "We are about to teach our human classmate about the natural order of species, about what happens when inferior creatures try to exist in spaces meant for their betters." Hana remained seated, her hand resting gently on Kim Doyen's head. The guardian had gone completely still. every muscle in his enhanced body ready for violence. She could feel the predatory intelligence behind his yellow eyes calculating distances, identifying threats, preparing for the hunt. "Professor Vextar," she said calmly, "you might want to step away from your desk." The reptilian looked at her in confusion. "What?" Hannah smiled, and for the first time since arriving at the academy, it was not a polite or nervous expression. It was the smile of someone who had been underestimated for far too long. "Because in about 10 seconds, she said, switching to Korean as she spoke to her companion, "things are going to get very interesting in here." Kim Doyen's lips pulled back from his teeth in what might have been his own smile. The hunt was about to begin. The word Hana spoke in Korean was simple, one syllable that carried the weight of humanity's careful planning and Earth's deepest secrets. "Hunt," Kim Doyen exploded from beneath the desk like black lightning. The creature that emerged was nothing like the sleepy animal the aliens had dismissed for weeks. This was humanity's masterpiece of genetic engineering, unleashed in all its terrifying glory. 4 feet of perfectly designed death moving faster than the alien student's enhanced reflexes could track. Kunethus barely had time to register movement before Doyen was airborne. The Guardian's powerful legs launched him across 15 feet of classroom space in a single bound. His yellow eyes burned like twin suns as his claws extended from paws that had seemed so harmless moments before. The insectoid screamed and threw himself sideways. Doyen's claws raked across the floating desk where Kunethus had been standing, leaving deep gouges in the metal surface. The Guardian landed in a perfect crouch, already turning toward his next target. Chaos erupted throughout the dome-shaped classroom. Morgan, the crystal being, tried to run, but his species was not built for speed. Doyen covered the distance between them in 3 fluid leaps using floating desks as stepping stones. The Guardian's jaws clamped down on one of Morgan's crystal arms, not to break it but to control it. The alien found himself pinned against the wall, unable to move but uninjured. Velkoth, the tree alien, attempted to use his branch-like limbs to create a barrier. Doyen flowed around the obstacles like liquid shadow, his enhanced flexibility allowing him to bend and twist in ways that defied normal anatomy. Within seconds, the tree being was wrapped in his own branches, tied up by a predator who understood exactly how much pressure to apply. Professor Vextar pressed himself against the far wall, his scales shifting through every color of fear and confusion. "What is happening?" he roared. "What is that creature?" "That," said Hana calmly, standing beside her desk, "is what happens when you underestimate Earth." 3 more alien students rushed Doyen from different directions, thinking their numbers would overwhelm him. They learned quickly that pack tactics worked both ways. The Guardian had been bred from wolves who hunted in coordinated groups, but he was an entire pack condensed into one perfect killing machine. Zasik, the serpentine alien, tried to use his species' natural speed advantage. His snake-like body could strike faster than most creatures could react, but Doyen had been designed by humans who understood that speed without intelligence was useless. The Guardian anticipated the strike, twisted away from the serpent's fangs, and grabbed Zasik behind the head where his multiple eyes could not track the movement. The serpent found himself coiled in his own body, tied in knots by a predator who had studied every alien species in the academy. 2 more students, a gas-based creature and something that looked like living metal, tried to coordinate their attack. The gas being attempted to surround Doyen with toxic clouds while the metal alien, charged with blade-like appendages, extended. Doyen simply held his breath and leaped straight up. The Guardian's powerful legs carried him 20 feet into the air, well above the toxic gas. He caught one of the dome's support beams and swung himself in a wide arc, using momentum to build striking power. His hind claws caught the metal alien in the center of its chest, sending it flying across the room to crash into a wall. The gas being tried to pursue upward, but Doyen was already moving again. He swung from beam to beam like Earth's ancient primates, staying above the toxic clouds while planning his next strike. "Impossible," whispered one of the remaining alien students. "How can one animal move like that?" Hana heard the question and smiled. "He is not just one animal," she said. "He carries the hunting instincts of wolves, the reflexes of great cats, the intelligence of dolphins, and the problem-solving abilities of primates. Plus a few improvements that humanity added." As if to demonstrate her point, Doyen dropped from the ceiling directly onto the gas being. But instead of attacking, he simply pressed a small device that had been hidden in his collar. The device activated with a soft humming sound, and suddenly the gas creature found its molecular structure solidifying. Within moments, it was trapped in a crystalline shell of its own compressed gas. Stasis field generator, Hana explained to the watching aliens. We thought it might come in handy. The remaining students backed away in terror. They had started this fight with 15 attackers. In less than 3 minutes, Doyen had neutralized 8 of them without causing any permanent injury. Each alien was trapped, restrained, or incapacitated, but none were seriously hurt. This restraint was somehow more frightening than violence would have been. It meant the creature was thinking, planning, choosing exactly how much force to use. It meant he could have killed them all but decided not to. Quinethus, bleeding green fluid from shallow scratches on his exoskeleton, pulled out a small device from his belt. It looked like some kind of energy weapon, though it was designed to resemble laboratory equipment. Stay back, monster, he hissed at Doyun. I will burn you to ash. The Guardian tilted his head and made a sound that might have been laughter. Then he did something that froze the blood of every alien in the room. He sat down, perfectly calm, completely relaxed. Yellow eyes fixed on Quinethus with the patience of a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to run. Go ahead, said Hana from across the room. Fire your weapon. Quinethus looked confused but raised the energy device. His claws found the activation switch. The weapon hummed with charging power. Do you know what happens when you fire an energy weapon in a sealed room? Hana asked conversationally. The heat has nowhere to go. The atmosphere ionizes. And if you are unlucky enough to miss your target, the beam reflects off the metal walls. Quinethus hesitated, his compound eyes calculating angles and distances. In his panic and rage, he had forgotten basic physics. One missed shot could kill everyone in the dome, including himself. But please, Hana continued, by all means take your shot. Doyen has been dodging laser targeting systems since he was 6 months old. It will be interesting to see if alien weapons are any more accurate than human ones. The Guardian remained perfectly still, but his yellow eyes tracked every tiny movement of Quinethus's weapon. His enhanced reflexes were already calculating trajectory and planning his evasion pattern. The aliens could see the intelligence in his gaze, the careful analysis of threat and response. They were not facing a simple animal. They were facing something that had been designed specifically to hunt creatures exactly like them. Professor Vextar finally found his voice.
Student Quinethus, lower your weapon immediately.
Violence between students is strictly forbidden. She started this, Quinethus snarled, but his voice carried less conviction than before. Her monster attacked us. After you locked us in this room and announced your intention to eliminate us, Hana pointed out reasonably. I believe that constitutes self-defense. The insectoid looked around at his fellow conspirators. Half of them were trapped or incapacitated. The others were pressed against the walls in terror. His perfect plan had become a perfect disaster in less than 5 minutes. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered the energy weapon. Kim Doyen remained sitting, but his tail wagged once, a gesture that somehow managed to be both friendly and threatening at the same time. Good choice, said Hana. She walked over to her guardian and scratched behind his ears. To the watching aliens, the casual affection between human and predator was almost as unsettling as the violence had been. Now, she said, looking around at the assembled students, I believe we were discussing symbiotic relationships. Professor Vextar, would you like to continue the lesson? I think we have an excellent real-world example to study. The giant reptilian stared at her with golden eyes that held new understanding. The human had just demonstrated something that would change how every species in the galaxy viewed Earth and its people. They were not the weak newcomers everyone had assumed. They were apex predators who had learned to disguise their nature behind polite smiles and academic achievements, and they had only just begun to show what they were capable of. The emergency lockdown lasted exactly 37 minutes. When Academy security finally overrode the classroom systems, they found a scene that would become legend throughout the galaxy. 15 alien students sat in perfect rows, their hands or appendages visible and empty. 8 of them showed signs of restraint. Crystal formations around limbs, branches tied in careful knots, or simple unconsciousness from precisely applied pressure points. None showed serious injury, but all displayed the hollow-eyed look of creatures who had encountered something beyond their understanding. At the front of the classroom, Professor Vextar stood frozen against the wall, his scales cycling through colors of shock and confusion. His golden eyes were fixed on the back corner where Lihanna sat calmly at her desk, taking notes as if nothing unusual had happened. Beside her, Kim Doyen lay curled beneath the workspace, apparently asleep. Security Chief Kelvanos was the first through the door. The amphibian administrator was built like a walking mountain, with skin that could deflect most hand weapons and a reputation for handling any crisis with calm efficiency. But when he surveyed the classroom, even his steady demeanor cracked. "What happened here?" he demanded in the deep rumbling voice of his species. Silence filled the dome. The alien students who had planned the attack stared at the floor, walls, ceiling, anywhere except at the human in the corner. Several were visibly shaking. Professor Vexitar cleared his throat. "There appears to have been a malfunction with the emergency systems," he said carefully. "We were locked in during my lecture." "A malfunction," repeated Kelvanos. His large eyes swept the room, taking in the scratched desks, the restrained students, and the general atmosphere of terror. "And these injuries?" "Accidents," said Kennethus quickly. His voice carried none of its usual arrogance. "We panicked when the doors sealed. Some students were hurt trying to escape." The security chief studied the insectoid's scratched exoskeleton and the fear scent pouring from his body. In his 200 years of academy service, Kelvanos had seen every type of student incident. This was something entirely different. "Miss Lee," he said, turning to Hannah, "do you have anything to add to this account?" Hannah looked up from her notes with the polite expression she had worn since her first day at the academy. The emergency systems activated during Professor Vextar's lecture on symbiotic relationships. Some students became frightened by the lockdown and acted unwisely. Kim Doyen helped calm the situation. She reached down to pat the sleeping creature beside her desk. At her touch, Doyen opened one yellow eye, yawned, and apparently went back to sleep. Security Chief Kelvanos was not fooled by the performance. His species had evolved from ambush predators, and he recognized the signs when he saw them. The human's companion was no more asleep than Kelvanos was blind, but he also understood politics. If he pressed the issue, he would have to file reports. Reports would reach the Galactic Council, and questions would be asked about how 15 students had been subdued by one human and her pet, without any of them willing to provide testimony. "I see," he said slowly. "Well, since no one appears to be seriously injured, I suggest we treat this as a learning experience. Emergency procedures exist for student safety, not for creating panic." He looked directly at Kennethus as he spoke. The insectoid flinched and nodded rapidly. "Classes are dismissed for the remainder of the day," Kelvanos continued. "All students involved will report to the medical facility for examination. Professor Vexistar, I would like to speak with you privately about upgrading our emergency protocols." The alien students filed out of the classroom in unusual silence. Normally, the corridors would be filled with their various languages and the sounds of academic discussion. Today, they moved like defeated soldiers leaving a battlefield. Hannah was the last to leave. She gathered her materials with careful precision while Kim Doyen stretched and yawned beside her. To anyone watching, they looked like a tired student and her sleepy pet heading back to their dormitory. But word had already begun to spread through the academy's communication networks. In the crystalline gardens where students gathered to socialize, groups of aliens whispered about what they had heard. The human's companion was not what it seemed. It had moved like liquid death, fought like a trained warrior, and shown intelligence that rivaled any sentient species. In the dormitory common areas, students who had dismissed humans as primitive newcomers began to reconsider everything they thought they knew about Earth's people. If they could create guardians like Kim Doyen, what other surprises were they hiding? In the faculty lounges, professors who had treated the human exchange program as a charitable gesture started asking uncomfortable questions. Why had Earth really sent Lihanna to the academy? What were they hoping to learn? And what message were they sending to the galaxy? 3 days after the classroom incident, Admiral Park Minho arrived at Nexus Prime Academy aboard the human embassy ship. He was a compact man with gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had fought in wars that most aliens could not imagine. Security Chief Kelvanos met him at the docking bay with full diplomatic honors. But as they walked through the academy halls, the amphibian could not hide his unease. "Admiral," he said carefully, "there have been some incidents involving your exchange student." "I heard," Park Min-ho replied. His tone gave nothing away. "How is Miss Lee adjusting to academy life?" "Better than expected," Calvanos admitted. "Her academic performance has been exceptional. However, some students have expressed concerns about her companion animal." They paused at an observation deck overlooking the main courtyard. Below them, alien students moved in small groups between buildings. But Calvanos noticed something that made his skin crawl with evolutionary memory. Every group gave wide space to one particular figure walking alone across the courtyard. Lihana moved with the same calm confidence she had always shown, but now the aliens around her displayed classic prey behavior. They watched her constantly while pretending not to look. They altered their paths to avoid coming too close, and their body language screamed of creatures who had encountered an apex predator. Beside her, Kim Do-yeon trotted like any normal companion animal. But even from this distance, Calvanos could see how the other students tracked his movement with fearful fascination. "What exactly is that creature?" the security chief asked. Admiral Park Min-ho smiled, and Calvanos suddenly understood why humans had earned their place among the galactic community so quickly. "Kim Do-yeon is exactly what we told you he was," the admiral said. "A companion animal, bred for loyalty, intelligence, and the protection of his human partner. But his capabilities are exactly what they appear to be." Park Min-ho continued smoothly. "Nothing more, nothing less. If some students have discovered that Earth's companion animals are more effective than they expected, well, that is hardly our fault." The admiral turned to face Calvanos directly. "Chief, let me be very clear about something. Miss Lee is here to learn, just as she has always claimed. But she is also here as a representative of humanity. How she is treated reflects how the galaxy views Earth and our people." The implication hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Calvanos felt a chill run through his amphibian blood as he realized the true purpose behind the exchange program. This had never been about education. It had been a test, a way for humanity to measure how they would be received among the stars. And if that reception proved hostile, "I believe Miss Lee has learned a great deal during her time here," Calvanos said carefully. "Yes," agreed Admiral Park Min-ho, "and so has everyone else." Below them, Hana disappeared into the academic complex, Kim Do-yeon trotting faithfully at her side. Around the courtyard, alien students continued their careful dance of avoidance and observation. The galaxy was learning new rules, and humanity had written them all. 6 months had passed since the classroom incident, and Nexus Prime Academy was a very different place. Lee Hana walked through the crystal corridors with the confidence of someone who no longer needed to prove herself. Her academic robes bore the silver threading that marked her as one of the top students in her year. Other students nodded respectfully as she passed, their various greetings offered in the universal language of academic peers, rather than the grudging acknowledgments of unwanted outsiders. Kim Do-yeon padded beside her, his black fur gleaming under the academy's artificial lights. To new students, he still looked like an exotic pet, but every alien who had been present during that fateful xenobiology class knew better. They watched him with the careful attention that prey species reserved for predators, even when those predators were apparently sleeping. The changes went far beyond simple respect for Hana and her guardian. Academy policies had been quietly revised after Admiral Park Min-ho's visit. Discrimination based on species origin was now explicitly forbidden. Emergency lockdown procedures required approval from 3 senior administrators, and most importantly, the definition of companion animals had been expanded to include any creature designated as such by their species government. Professor Vextar's xenobiology classes had become the most popular courses in the academy, not because his teaching style had improved, but because students were desperate to understand what they had witnessed. The giant reptilians' lectures now included detailed discussions of Earth's evolutionary history, focusing particularly on the concept of apex predators and their role in shaping ecosystems. Hana took her usual seat in the advanced lecture hall, though it was no longer isolated in the back corner. Demand for enrollment had forced the class into the academy's largest amphitheater, and students from across the galaxy competed for admission. She now sat in the front row, surrounded by aliens who hung on her every word during discussion periods. "Today we examine the concept of coevolution," Professor Vextar announced to the packed hall. His scales had settled into a permanent shade of respectful green whenever he addressed Hana directly. The process by which different species shape each other's development over time through their interactions. He activated a holographic display showing various Earth creatures. Predators and prey locked in an eternal dance of adaptation, each species pushing the other to become faster, stronger, smarter. Earth provides us with exceptional examples of this phenomenon, the professor continued, particularly in the relationship between humans and their companion species. A three-dimensional image of Kim Do-yeon appeared in the center of the hall. But this was not the sleepy creature the students saw every day. This was a technical schematic showing enhanced muscle structure, modified neural pathways, and genetic improvements that made even the most advanced alien biotechnology look primitive. The creature you see before you represents thousands of years of selective breeding, combined with modern genetic engineering, Professor Vexistar explained. Humans did not simply domesticate animals. They created perfect symbiotic partners, creatures that embody the best traits of multiple species while remaining absolutely loyal to their human companions. A student near the back raised a tentacled appendage. Professor, are all human companion animals so enhanced? The question everyone had been wondering about for months. Hana felt every eye in the amphitheater focus on her and Do-yeon. She reached down to scratch behind the guardian's ears, and he opened one yellow eye to look at the assembled students. That would depend on what you mean by enhanced, she said calmly. Kim Do-yeon is exactly what he was bred to be. A companion, protector, and friend. If that seems enhanced compared to other species animals, perhaps it says more about your breeding programs than ours. The subtle challenge in her words was not lost on anyone. Several alien students shifted uncomfortably, remembering their own species' failures to create anything approaching Do-yeon's capabilities. But surely such creatures are rare on your world, pressed another student, this one from a species that looked like walking starfish. The resources required to produce them must be enormous. Hana smiled, and the expression carried just enough mystery to make the aliens wonder. Earth has many resources, she said simply. What she did not say was that Kim Do-yeon was actually considered a standard companion model by human military standards. The real guardians, the ones assigned to diplomats and colony leaders, made him look like a house pet. But the galaxy was not ready for that information yet. After class, Hana made her way to the Academy's central communication hub. It was time for her monthly report to Earth, and she had much to discuss with the colonial administration. The secure holographic projector activated, revealing the familiar face of Director Choi Yuna. The older woman had been Hana's roommate years ago during their training, and now served as Earth's coordinator for interstellar education programs. Hana, Yuna said with genuine warmth. You look well. How are you adjusting to celebrity status? It has its advantages, Hana replied, though I miss being underestimated. It made certain things easier. They both laughed. But their conversation quickly turned serious as Hana provided her detailed assessment of the Academy's changing atmosphere. Respect, through strength, seems to be the only currency they understand, she reported. Intellectual achievement alone was not enough. They needed to see what humanity is capable of when threatened. And now they are very careful not to threaten us, Hana said. But they are also intensely curious about our capabilities. Applications for exchange programs with Earth universities have increased by 500% since the incident. Director Yuna nodded thoughtfully. The Galactic Council has been making subtle inquiries about expanding diplomatic relations. Several species that previously ignored our trade requests are now sending ambassadors to negotiate partnerships. Fear can be a useful foundation for respect, Hana observed. But we need to be careful not to rely on it exclusively. Some species respond better to displays of cooperation than demonstrations of power. As if to illustrate her point, there was a soft chime at her communication booth's entrance. Hana looked up to see Morgan, the crystal being who had been one of Kunethus's conspirators during the classroom incident. Please excuse me, Director, Hana said. I have a visitor. She gestured for Morgan to enter, the crystal being moved with the careful precision of someone who had learned to be very respectful around humans and their companions. Kim Do-yeon lifted his head to watch the alien approach but remained relaxed. Miss Lee? Morgan said, his voice carrying the sound of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Hana replied. What can I do for you? I wanted to inform you that Quinethus has withdrawn from the academy, the crystal being said. He returned to his homeworld last week. Hana was not surprised. The insectoid had been a broken creature since the classroom incident, jumping at shadows and refusing to be in the same room as any human or their companions. His academic performance had collapsed completely. I am sorry to hear that, she said diplomatically. Are you? Morgan asked with what might have been curiosity. He did try to kill you. He tried to eliminate what he saw as a threat to the natural order, Hana corrected. Fear makes people do terrible things. I do not take it personally. The crystal being studied her with his multifaceted eyes. Your species is very strange, Miss Lee. You show mercy to enemies who would have shown you none. Mercy is not weakness, Hana replied. It is a choice that strong people can afford to make. After Morgan left, Hana returned to her conversation with Director Yuna. But their discussion was interrupted again, this time by an academy-wide announcement. All students please report to the main amphitheater for a special assembly, came Security Chief Kelvanos' voice over the communication system. We have important news to share regarding academy policies and interspecies relations. Hana made her way to the massive gathering space along with thousands of other students. The amphitheater buzzed with conversation in dozens of languages as aliens speculated about the purpose of the meeting. When Security Chief Kelvanos took the stage, the hall fell silent. The amphibian administrator's presence commanded attention, even from species that towered over him. Students of Nexus Prime Academy, he began. Today marks the beginning of a new era in our institution's history. After careful consideration by the Board of Directors and consultation with the Galactic Council, we are pleased to announce the expansion of our exchange programs with Earth. A murmur ran through the assembled students. Many turned to look at Hana, who maintained her calm expression despite feeling a surge of satisfaction. Beginning next semester, Kelvanos continued, we will welcome 50 human exchange students to our academy. They will be joining all levels of study, from basic galactic history to advanced xenobiology. The murmur became a roar of excited conversation. 50 humans meant 50 companion animals, 50 demonstrations of Earth's capabilities, 50 reminders that humanity was not to be underestimated. In addition, the security chief said, raising his voice to quiet the crowd, Nexus Prime will be establishing a permanent Earth Studies department.